Welcome, everybody. We're here for the webinar called Coaching for Change, Adapting to an Era of Transformation. And folks are joining us, so make sure to settle in. When you get your eyes on that chat box, go ahead, type in where you're joining us from. I myself am here in not so sunny South Florida at the moment, but we're definitely enjoying the milder weather. So let's see where everyone is coming in from. LA, hello to our West Coast friends. And Minnesota, excellent. And our Midwest, we have representation from our Midwest with Iowa. Hi, Beth, it's good to see you. And we have some friends in Miami as well. Hi, Nancy. It's good to see you too. Welcome, everybody. So my name is Marie Barnes. I'm one of the principal analysts on the research team with Brandon Hall Group. And with us today, we have our esteemed guest, Laurel McKenzie. She's with Coach Hub. So I'll tell you a little bit more about her and do more of a formal introduction. We're going to give it a couple more minutes to make sure that people get logged in and get settled in. And Salt Lake. Hi, Eric. You know, that's Laurel and I were just talking. We both have very long travel bucket lists. And Salt Lake City is on my list for sure. I have a friend who went recently and said it was absolutely gorgeous. So I definitely need to get out there. Excellent. So, you know what? We have a lot of really good stuff to talk about. Let's go ahead and get started. As I mentioned a moment ago, we're here for the webinar Coaching for Change, Adapting to an Era of Transformation. And feels like we're all very, very familiar with change these days. So again, Laurel McKenzie is a behavioral scientist with Coach Hub. Welcome, Laurel. She is a dynamic professional, I can attest to that, with specialized experience in cognitive performance training and behavioral science consultation. She is currently pursuing her PhD in IO psychology, and that's also my formal academic training and background. So we both love IO, and we both definitely connected on that. And she intends to focus her research on healthy lifestyle behaviors, such as sleep and diet and physical activity, and the effect of those things on work. She's also interested in discovering ways to use her knowledge and experience to improve human performance and contribute to high-level organizational goals by producing human-centric insights that maximize human potential. And again, as I mentioned, my name is Marie Barnes. I'm part of the research team with Brandon Hall Group. Also with our Brandon Hall team is Melissa Benavides, and she is part of our operations team. She's behind the scenes, but extremely important. She's here to help us make sure that everything runs smooth from the back of the house and keep things running smoothly from behind the scenes. Let's see, let's go to the next slide. We, of course, want to thank our webinar sponsor, Coach Hub. Coach Hub is the leading global talent development platform that enables organizations to create a personalized, measurable, and scalable coaching programs for the entire workforce. And their website is listed there. Definitely take a moment, click on the link, and check out their website. They have a lot of really good information there. If you're hearing about Brandon Hall Group for the first time, we are a human capital management research firm, and we work with organizations to help them achieve excellence in all of their human capital management practices. And we do that in a few different ways. You can see some of them listed there on the screen. We have our membership research program, our preferred provider program, and also our awards program. So Be sure to check out our website, brandonhall.com, and learn a little bit more about the ways that we work with organizations to help them succeed. So speaking of research, a good deal of what we do at the core of our business is surveys. And at any given moment in time, we have several surveys open. So these are the ones that are open at the moment. And you can click on the links. We really appreciate when people share their insights and share their voice on these really important topics. We just recently launched our HCM survey for 2024. So looking at all of the human capital management practices and looking ahead and what is the next year going to bring us and what are the most critical factors and what are your thoughts and insights about all these different areas of HCM. So when you go to our website, you'll see the surveys tab at the upper right hand corner of the screen. And just take a few minutes and fill out one or a couple of the surveys and, let your voice be heard. We'd love for you to do that. This is a Zoom webinar, and we want to make sure that it's as interactive as possible. And you already found the chat box, and I'm seeing greetings from New York City. That's one of my favorite places. So there's also a Q&A panel. We will leave a few minutes at the end of the webinar for you to ask questions, and we'll be able to talk through those. But we also want to have a lot of interaction. We want to make sure that you participate and that it's a great exchange. So be on the lookout for other chances to interact. We're going to be using Menti if you're familiar with it. If not, you will be. And just for, I guess, just to make sure, find that raise hand button and raise your hand. And let's see if everybody is around. Wonderful. Good deal. And we have representation from Canada. That's fantastic. And just one more reminder for housekeeping, the slide deck will be sent after the conclusion of the webinar. So you will get the PowerPoint deck. All right. Okay, so let's jump right in. Okay, I think we should go to the next. There we go. Let's go to the next one. And then the next one, Melissa. All right. So these are the questions that some of you responded to when you registered for the webinar. And so here are the results. This is what we found. How prepared is your organization for adapting to ongoing change and transformation? A good percentage said somewhat prepared. That's what jumped out at me. Yet the next question, the pace of change is crazy. The pace of change is really has increased over the past several years for lots of different reasons. So over half said some shifts in the culture, and a third said several shifts in the culture over the past few years. So Laurel and I were looking at this and talking about it. I was like, wow, a lot of people are dealing with a lot of fast change and are only somewhat prepared, not really fully prepared for it. And then last, how familiar are you with strategies for managing organizational change? It's a really big group of people. You're somewhat familiar, so maybe a little to be curious and to be interested. And what our hope and our wish is for our time together on the webinar is that you gather more information, that you learn more information, and that you do become more familiar with different strategies and effective ways at managing organizational change. Laurel, did you want to chime in on any of your reactions on this, or should we go ahead and dive right into more of the material?
No, I think you're spot on, Marie. And I think that what I find really interesting here is that you all seem to, have like at least a baseline understanding of change. And so I'm really interested to see how perhaps this webinar might deepen your understanding of what transformations might look like and what you can do to better prepare yourselves to effectively get through a transformation and have some success on the other side of it. So really looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. All right. So without further ado, let's talk about transformations. Laurel, take it away.
All right. So hi everybody. So good to see you. Well, I guess it's with a Zoom is to see you as I can. For me, it's good evening. I actually live over here in Germany. My husband is in the army, and so we have been blessed with the opportunity to be stationed over here for a little while. So it's in the evening for us. So I live in the future. The future's looking good though. So have hope. Your evening will look good. So to start today, I'd like to go with a quote from one of the great minds in history of science. You might know who he is, Charles Darwin. And he said, "It's not the strongest of the species who survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." And the reason I bring this quote up is because change is vital for survival. And that's not only true in the animal kingdom, it's also true with organizations. And so we have to be able to adapt in our organizations as well to change. Those who do adapt to change are more likely to thrive. And I'm going to give you an example of a company that did not adapt to change and thus did not thrive. Does Blockbuster ring a bell to anybody on this call? Because I know it does for me. There's lots of memories made around walking into Blockbuster as a kid with dad and finding my favorite 3 to 4 movies and taking them home and watching them within the allotted time period before we've got to rush back and go pick some more. And so there was a lot of iconic memories made with the idea of Blockbuster. But as time went on, more flexible options started to pop up, right? There were things like Redbox, the vending machine of movie rentals. I see some people have some more memories of Blockbuster, but then things like Redbox started to show up. And I think sometimes there were Redbox vending machines in the Blockbuster like parking lot trying to steal business. And then things like Netflix came around, those streaming services. And Blockbuster continued to rely on its nostalgic movie rental um, theory and environment, and they did not adapt to change. And now they're nearly obsolete. I don't know how many Blockbusters are left. I think there's only like a couple. And I think it's largely due to not responding to change. And so that's just a simple example of when a company doesn't respond to change. And that's why talking about transformations is really important because they're inevitable. And for an organization to survive and thrive, transformations and change have to occur. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we'll also talk about some options that your organizations have to make sure that transformations and changes are effective. So we can go to the next slide. Now we've got a little model here that we came up with at Coach Hub. I can't promise you that we made it up, but I know that we at least remastered it onto this slide. But what we show here are that there are several different stages and parts to the change process. There's the status quo, which means that the current state of the organization. And then there's triggers for change, and there's different things that go on that would cause a change to occur. And then there's types of transformations. There's a variety of transformations that could occur. Then we've got to think about how we're going to manage those changes and transformations, especially from the human component, and then potentially some solutions to help manage that change, something like coaching. Now, today, we're going to talk about the last three. We're going to talk about the types of transformations that exist, and then we're going to dive into change management strategies, specifically some of the challenges that we face on the human side of managing change, and then we'll talk about how coaching can support change. Go ahead to the next slide. Perfect. So let's start right in the middle. As a fundamental part of this conversation, let's make sure we're on the same page on what types of transformations exist and the various types that there are. And I think the best way to do that is to use some examples. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And we're going to look at the 5 main kinds. And you can pop these all up, Melissa. I think they're going to build. But there are 5 different types of change or transformation. There's business, digital, organizational, operational, and cultural. Now, the first thing I want to highlight is that these don't happen in silos. You don't have like a business transformation typically happen without probably also a cultural transformation or a digital transformation. They typically co-occur, and they are a result of each other. Okay. But for the sake of this conversation and to make sure that we understand what each one is, I am going to separate them out and show you examples of each one just so you can understand the differences between them. And maybe even for yourself, identify which ones your organization might be going through or you anticipate that your organization might go through. In fact, as we go through these, I encourage you to potentially write down which ones seem relevant or seem like they're happening in your organization. And then maybe in the future, we can have a conversation around how different solutions might help you effectively move through that transformation. So let's go to the first one, a business transformation. And this is the biggest one. This usually encompasses a little bit of everything. But a business transformation at a definitional level is a comprehensive and often pretty complex process that organizations go through to make fundamental changes to their business. From a structure perspective, a process, they change their technologies, they change their culture. Some key elements that you'll see when a company is going through a business transformation are that there's a clear change in the business goals. They're entering a new market, they're adopting new technology, there's a new vision, or they're trying to innovate. And a super clear example of this is DSM. DSM started in coal mining, and then they moved into petroleum, and then they switched to materials, and lastly, they innovated and moved into nutrition, a complete industry switch. So that's what a business transformation would look like. And as you can see, if someone's going through those types of transformations, they probably are also having a cultural transformation, a digital transformation. So it highlights that there are multiple transformations that could go on at once, but for a very plain business transformation perspective, DSM went through one by changing industries. Now let's look at digital transformation. A digital transformation is when a company integrates digital technologies into various parts of their business. It'll fundamentally change how it operates and how it delivers value to the customer. This could be something like moving to cloud computing, implementing AI, moving into mobile integration of your service, or personalizing it. And that's basically what Volkswagen did here. So they didn't want to be relegated and they didn't want to be dependent on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. So they created their own company, Cariad, and they developed their own software to go into their Volkswagen vehicles. So that digital transformation was to keep them independent from other organizations, other manufacturers. Now, if we look at organizational transformation, this involves a significant change in the structure of the business. These are mergers and acquisitions, new business strategies, ways to streamline decision-making processes or making a company more efficient. And that's what Facebook did here was more of an M&A. They absorbed their competition. In 2012, that's when they bought Instagram. And the goal here was to wipe out their competition and become the leading social media platform. So it was an organizational transformation in that they absorbed another company in order to eliminate their competition and be more successful in that social media space. Now, an operational transformation is when a company makes changes to its day-to-day operations. So this is specifically just how it functions on a day-to-day business. This could be to improve efficiency, it could be to reduce costs or enhance performance. This could look like streamlining workflows, adding automation. It could also be adding predictive analytics, things like that to make the company work more efficiently on a day-to-day basis. And that's what GE did when they, on the inside, moved to this Six Sigma methodology. They were noticing some issues with slow growth and a lack of focus. And so they introduced the Six Sigma methodology in order to increase efficiency in their operations. And then lastly, if we look at a cultural transformation, this involves a significant shift in values and beliefs and behaviors within the organization. It goes beyond like structural and procedural changes and aims at changing the fundamental mindset of the employees and the individuals within the organization. And its aim is to shift what the norm looks like for the employees within the organization. This could be because of new leadership. It could be to open communication channels. It could be to involve employees in more decision making, things like that. Or it could be an inclusion of D&I initiatives that they want to incorporate better into the organization. This happened at Microsoft and I'm going to I'm sorry, Satya, I'm not going to say your name right, the CEO there, she wanted to be more innovative and inclusive with it, and you have more of a growth mindset inside the organization. And so they made some changes in their culture to innovate and be more successful in the launches of their new products. So that was a mouthful, and I know that was a lot, but that's our 5 different types of transformation that could occur. And again, they typically happen in connection with each other. You don't typically have a cultural transformation on its own. It's usually in response to something. And to Sat, thank you, Stephen. Sorry for misgendering our Satya. Um, and then, so these different transformations typically happen in conjunction with each other in order to make effective changes towards performance goals, new strategy, new business, new industries, things like that. Then we can go to the next slide. All right, let's look at change management challenges. And what we're specifically going to look at here are the human element of change and how we manage an organization from the human perspective so that you can move a company from point A to point B, and you need your people to do that. And people typically are initially resistant to change, and that's what we're really going to dive into today. And to do that, I'm going to transition it over to Marie to talk about some research.
So, let's see. Are we going to go to the Menti slide next?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
there was a
Okay.
research slide, but we'll skip it.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
go ahead and grab your mobile device and scan the QR code. The link is also in the chat. And let's answer the question. Let's hear from you. Why are people so resistant to change? So a word or phrase, I think you can enter up to 3 of them. And let's stay there. Yeah, we're gonna move over to, here we go. So type in your words and phrases. Answer the question, why are people so resistant to change? So the unknown, challenges, insecurity. Excellent, keep them coming. I think we've seen all of these. We'll give it a couple more seconds. You can either click on the link in the chat, you can use your handy dandy mobile device and scan the QR code. So we have 30 responses. Let's get a couple more. Perceived loss, and I am comfortable. Some of us might remember, don't move my cheese. Don't make me uncomfortable. Don't move things around. Don't shuffle. I'm comfortable, and it's stress is something different. All right, 31 responses. That's great. Okay, so you're all right. These are all excellent, excellent answers. Now we can go back to some of the results that we have from our research at Brandon Hall as we jump back to the slide. Oh, there we go. So some of the complications, we did an employee experience survey earlier this calendar year. And when we looked at the building a positive employee experience, one of the obstacles, one of the barriers is that organizational change faces resistance. And so 39% of the organizations who responded said, yes, resistance to change is a difficult thing to deal with. It is a very common barrier. So we can go to the next one. So in terms of how people deal with change, resistance is part of it. And now Laurel is going to walk us through all the other different parts of the experience.
Thanks, Marie. And I loved all your responses because I think they're so accurate. And just, I know fear is a big part of a resistance to change. And you all had a lot of really effective, not even effective answers. I don't know the word I'm trying to think of, realistic answers in terms of like just what people face when it comes to change. And I want to bring up the Kubler-Ross curve here. And keep in mind, this is typically used for grief as a model, but I think it's relevant here as well. And that's why you see shock and denial, because it's typically associated with grief. And not all change brings about shock and denial, although sometimes it can. I imagine unknown layoffs or reductions in the force can feel like a sudden change that might result in shock or denial. But in general, changes that we're talking about in these transformations, they might not have those two, but they certainly look like frustration, which is something that I noticed that was mentioned, and can look like depression depending on the type of change that occurred. And keep in mind that not everybody deals with depression in the same way, and they don't always do well in dealing with it by themselves. But either way, what we've got to figure out is to get people from being frustrated and potentially depressed or having other negative potential feelings around the change, and a lot of them that you all mentioned. And how can we get people through those and into an experimentation phase, learning and integrating those changes? And just to kind of bring this whole curve to life, let's think about DSM again, that we brought up earlier, that went through several rounds of transformation when they went from coal to petroleum to materials. A lot of those changes had to have come with some layoffs as people's specialties were no longer required for the business, or as they moved to different ways of working, especially when they moved into these entirely new industries like nutrition. So I am more than certain that people moved through this curve as DSM went through those changes, and people were eliminated, or even those who stayed might have struggled with the changes that came with changing industries in that way. And so the question is how can we help people manage their feelings, manage the change in a way that's effective, and so that the change and the transformation is successful? And we can go to the next slide. So we're going to look at three different ways that companies manage change. The first thing some companies do is they do nothing, which is, let me just say, not an effective strategy. And then there's some traditional change management strategies that we'll go over. And then we'll talk a little bit about how coaching can help move that transformation along at multiple levels within your organization. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start with what happens when a company does nothing. Now, on the left here, you'll see different roles, and on the right, you'll see the risks as a result of doing nothing according to that role. So if you are someone that's leading the change in your organization and you choose to do nothing about the change or transformation, you're going to have difficulty in communicating with impact and embodying the transformation. So basically, how do you get change to occur if you don't talk about it? If you don't let other people know about it, if you do nothing, the change just occurs and then we go on as business as usual. That difficulty in communication is going to be really difficult to get everybody on the same page beneath you, to get everybody to make that shift with you. Now, if you're someone who's managing the change, this is going to be really difficult if you do nothing. It's going to be difficult to manage business as usual because business is not usual anymore. It's now changed. Think about it. When you move from coal mine, or let's make a more drastic one, materials to nutrition, you can't do business as usual. You're in a drastically different industry. You're going to have to make some changes. And so doing nothing isn't going to help shift your employees over into the new area of work. The risks here are burnout and departures. As people don't understand what the change is, they don't understand their role in the change. When you do nothing to explain that, when you do nothing to help that change occur, people aren't going to stick around because they don't understand what they're doing. Their satisfaction might be lower, things like that. And then on the lower level with your individual or not lower level, but your individual contributors, they're the ones experiencing the change. And if nothing's done, then you'll see a decline in day-to-day performance. They're going to be disengaged. They're going to feel isolated because they don't know what's going on. And again, you're going to start to see some departures as people leave, as they can't manage the change themselves, so they don't understand their role in the change. Now let's go to the next one. So there are some traditional change management strategies. And the first thing I want to say is there's nothing wrong with any of the ones that I'm about to describe. All of them, or most of them, are really effective in helping managing change. But what they may be missing is a little bit of a personal touch that something like coaching could offer. But a lot of the traditional change management strategies are centered around different types of training. And these are meant to help from a technical perspective, if it was a digital change or maybe an entire industry change, or they're around methodologies that are changing in ways that they do work. There's employee engagement programs to help employees feel like they can boost their engagement in this new world of working while they're in the same organization. And then a lot of organizations will just go ahead and hire change management consultants. And these people are trained to help the company move through a change as it occurs. And usually they then leave and go and move on to another company going through a change. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of these. Many of them are effective and helpful in helping manage a change. But what I would argue that they can be missing sometimes is a personal one-to-one touch with each individual to help them think about what the change means for them and how they as an individual can navigate that change and move through that Kubler-Ross curve that we were just talking about at an individual basis. So let's look at this pyramid. And what this pyramid shows is, again, we've broken it down into leadership or roles and responsibilities, and what the roles and responsibilities would be for each level to make a change occur. And at the top, what leaders need to focus on is creating urgency around the change, forming a powerful coalition, meaning a group of allies that agree on the change and are committed to making the change occur, and then creating a vision for the change. So that vision is going to articulate to the rest of the organization why we're doing this, why we're moving from coal mining to petroleum, things like that. And then the managers of change, they need to be able to communicate that vision, empower action for their employees, and then create quick wins. So when you make a drastic change, you need to help those employees figure out a small quick win to boost that morale in this new way of work that's coming their way. And then lastly, you need your individual contributors to build on the change. You need them to come along on the journey with you, because at the end of the day, they are the ones that are going to make sure that the change sticks, especially in cultural changes, because these individual contributors make up the majority of your population. So if we look at coaching as a solution, we're going to start with some research on what Brandon Hall Group has seen when it comes to coaching and what it can provide to organizations. And then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about it from CoachUp's perspective.
Thanks, Laurel. So a couple of interesting findings from our survey research. This particular information came from a study we did that looked at what are the different ways to partner with employees for their career development. And one of the really robust points of view from Brandon Hall Group is the idea of democratization of coaching. So really providing coaching to employees at all levels, as Laurel just mentioned, providing that change management support at the individual contributor level is critical. And she mentioned they really are the backbone of the business. They are the workforce who were getting the work done. And in that middle level, there's always a really important opportunity to identify that low-hanging fruit, those quick wins, so that you can build traction and build that positive traction. So we found that only 49% of organizations say that their coaching and mentoring programs come all the way down to the individual contributor level. But according to our surveys, according to this survey, it really the coaching helps employees understand how to find their own answers, how to develop their own skills. And really, it reinforces the idea of them taking agency for their own professional growth and development. And that's something that we find is connected to engagement and is really beneficial to organizations. We can go to the next slide. The other thing that we noticed from our learning and development benchmark study is that over 20% of organizations already have platforms that are coaching and mentoring platforms. So that was a really great indicator, at least in my mind, that about a fifth of organizations that participated in the survey already have the platforms, the technology. And so hopefully that'll tell us that it tells us that that will continue to grow in that area. And here we have again coaching and mentoring. When we asked, organizations said, which opportunities do you provide for employees to grow in their current positions? 68%, it was the highest of all of the different options that respondents could choose from, was coaching and mentoring. So the platforms are there, we're getting there, and it's one of the highest frequency opportunities. So these are all indications that coaching is really a solid solution. So we keep saying coaching and coaching. We want to make sure that we're all comparing apples to apples and that we have the same kind of common reference definition. So Laurel's going to walk us through what do we mean by coaching so that we're all on the same page about what we're talking about.
Thanks, Maureen. And I find that research that you just spoke about really insightful, especially working in a coaching organization. And it's encouraging to see that coaching is catching on as I guess, a trend in organizations to help people develop at the individual level. But let's make sure we're on the same page on what we mean with coaching, because it can get misconstrued for a lot of different things. So, Coach Hub's definition of coaching is that it involves partnering with clients to help them reflect on themselves, their situation, and context, and identify new insights and actions to unlock their potential. It can also help with enhancing well being and improving performance. Now, the biggest comparison that I want to make here is that coaching is not the same as mentoring. And we get that misconception often. Mentorship is a mentor is someone who has experience in the same industry or field, and they're giving advice according to what they've experienced in the industry or field. With coaching, you don't necessarily have to have the exact same industry experience to be effective as a coach, because coaching is helping someone unlock their potential as an individual, as a human, meaning and helping them grow or cultivate a growth mindset, helping with skills such as delegation, helping with emotional regulation or goal setting. And those types of skills and behaviors transcend industry. You need to know how to do goal setting, whether you work at Blockbuster or if you work at Microsoft. And the same is true of delegation, emotion regulation, and things like that. So there's a big difference between coaching and mentorship. It's also different from performance appraisals. It's not the same as training. Your coach isn't going to come with a preset of assignments for you to do, and then you get trained on the material. It's also different from sports coaching. I was an athlete in college, so I can certainly relate to this one. But when you're a coach in a sport, you come to the field with drills set up, with cones, with a plan. Coaches are coming to listen and grow alongside you, and you're in the driver's seat as the coachee. And the coach is here to help you move along on the path that you set. Lastly, it's different from psychotherapy or mental health counseling. The goal is not to treat mental diagnoses, and coaches are trained to spot when they're creeping into a clinical field or clinical situation and help refer them to the appropriate expert for that type of help. So coaching is in its own, especially business coaching, is in its own unique little niche that's separate from the ones that I just described. So let's talk about how coaching can help with transformations. And on the left, it should already look familiar. We've talked about how or what each role needs to do as their in their responsibilities for transformations and changes. And this is what coaching can do on the right-hand side to help. And as I go through these, what I'd love for you to do is just start to think about which ones are relevant for your organization. Where do you need help? Where are you seeing that maybe you have a blind spot or a gap that you need to work on and cultivate, and recognize whether coaching can fit that gap for you. So when it comes to creating urgency, coaching can help find better ways to communicate and create that sense of urgency. Coaches are great at doing role plays to practice what that communication might look like. They may also help an individual realize that they need alliances to form that powerful coalition. And they're wonderful at helping create a clear vision and define a better strategy alongside you as a thought partner. Now, for the middle group, when it comes to communicating the vision, again, coaches are really great for role playing and figuring out the best approach and reflecting back on you how your approach comes across as someone who's trying to communicate the vision, and if the employees will be receptive to it or not. They can also help with creating empowering actions and that you can then pass on to your employees to help them manage the change. And they can help raise awareness around short-term wins and identify what those wins might actually be for them. So again, your coach is like your thought partner to help you figure out what it looks like for you to create wins, empower action, or communicate that vision better. Those are things you bring to your coach and they help you work through. Now, lastly, as an individual contributor, you're the one responsible for making the change stick. And so coaching is a great place to come to with your challenges, with the things that you're facing as you try to adopt the change that your organization is trying to get you to adopt. And so coaching can help you or hold you accountable to helping with those goals that the company has, and also maybe work on a growth mindset to be more open to those changes as they come through, and then help you reflect on what you can improve to be a better change ally as the change moves through your organization. Okay, so when we're looking at this whole change curve, or this whole, I'm sorry, change pyramid, what I want you to really notice is that coaching, and the great thing about Coach Hub is that the goal is to democratize coaching. Because what coaching can do is it can help at every single level of your organization to manage a transformation. You may need your top managers to figure out how to create a vision, but you also need your individual contributors to adopt the change and have a growth mindset about the change occurring. And coaching helps from the top to the bottom and everything in between to give that individual someone to talk to and someone to work through their role in the change and how they can help move that change through until it's successful. So take one more look at this. Feel free to take a picture or a screenshot, because I highly encourage you to think about how, if you have a coaching program existing already, how can you better use it for your transformation initiatives that are going on? Or what possibly can you do to adopt a coaching culture within your organization, or hire a coaching organization to come in and provide these opportunities for you? All right,
Before
so we're
we
going to
go
wrap
there,
it up. Oh, go ahead, Marie.
let's back up for a quick second. We got a question in the Q&A box. So it was about formalized coaching programs. So it's a two-part question. How would you describe what we refer to as a formalized coaching program? And if you had to guess about what percentage or how many organizations have a formalized coaching program, what would you say?
Okay. So, part one of that question, and what a formalized coaching program would mean. Usually, what at least what formalized means for me is that the
Mhm.
coaching is centered around a need or a use case for the organization. Meaning, you're trying to increase engagement at your organization. So you implement a formal coaching program with trained coaches, whether you hire them internally or you hire someone like Coach Hub, and they come in, and their whole goal is to help improve engagement within your organization. I've also seen them used. We have them ourselves for D&I initiatives. So how can you create more inclusive leadership? So a formalized program is really a program that's set up to meet a need within the organization, and it's not just handed to the organization and the employees and said, "Go, be forth and be coached." I would say that's a little less formal because there's not like an end goal in mind. While it's still super effective, I would say it's less formal because we're not trying to achieve anything. We're just giving our employees the resources at that point. Um,
And if you had to guess about what
mm,
percentage of organizations, and I know that's a big open-ended kind of question because I know my mind
yeah,
thinks of it globally or just in the
yeah.
US or large organizations, SMBs. But I guess if you had to just come up with a guesstimate.
Hmm. That is a tough question, and because Coach Hub's global, I'm trying to like compute like a global percentage point, but because I work for the North American market, that's probably a little bit easier for me to think about.
Mm.
I would say between either having a coaching vendor like Coach Hub or better up some of our competitors, or if they have an internal few coaches to help the organization, I would optimistically say 30 to 40% have some form of coaching within their organization. But that's a complete and utter guess. So I don't know how
Yeah,
accurate
no,
it
it's a guesstimate.
is.
But I think I was actually thinking along the same lines. And because it also came to mind, some organizations have internal coaching practices.
Right.
So that formalized, I completely agree with how you described that. There's a purpose to it, right? There's an objective, and there's something it's centered upon.
Right.
But yeah, it was just a guesstimate.
Yeah.
So, let's see. That was a question that we had gotten. Now, last, let's go ahead. Actually, let's skip to the next slide because I want to see if we have any other questions. We have time for maybe a few more questions. Either go into the question box or type in the chat area. And what are your burning questions? What would you like to talk to Laurel about regarding any of the material that we've talked about? I'm not sure that everybody has seen the Kubler-Ross. There were a couple of different elements there on that curve. There were more than normal. I think we think of change as like a 3-step with Lewin, or the Cotter model. But I think the one that you shared was really informative. You're welcome, Carly. All right, if we don't have any questions, and that can stay open, then let's go back to the Menti, and it's time to grab your mobile device, and you can click the link that Melissa's going to include on the chat. You can also use your mobile device and scan the QR code, and we're going to switch over to Menti. Here's your prompt. In a word or a phrase, what are your top takeaways? What are your top takeaways from the conversation that we've had from today's webinar? So a word or a phrase, what are you taking away? Maybe it's when Laurel asked you to look at that pyramid and reflect, that precious gift of reflection time, right? Which one of these is resonating for you now? Which one of these do you find yourself in? And maybe it led you to think of something you wouldn't have been able to think of without that space to ponder and to wonder and to take stock of where things are. So let's see, we're waiting for responses, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to form a word cloud. What are your top takeaways?
Maybe while we let those populate, Eric sent in a question about how, I might just answer him while you guys think about your answer. How do you address providing coaching bandwidth for organizations for change? If individuals would benefit from a coach, how do you provide this for hundreds of team members who need it? Eric, this is a great question, and we actually get these kinds of questions a lot. And for how I respond to this is that the managers of the employees who are going to get coaching have to make space for that employee to get coached. Now, at Coach Hub, we recommend that employees get coached once every 2 weeks, just to keep the information fresh, keep a rapport going, keep change occurring. And each session's 45 minutes. So basically, what we're asking managers of employees getting coached to do is to give their employees 45 minutes every 2 weeks, twice a month, to work on themselves and work through a transformation. And so it becomes, and that's where a coaching culture becomes incredibly important, because the managers above and the employees and the ones around them have to understand that coaching is important and that there needs to be space for this coaching. And so, and individuals can schedule, at least a coach up can schedule the coaching on their own. And so they can find time in their schedule and plan it. But it really becomes important in that coaching culture for the managers to give that space for coaching to be a priority a few times a month.
I've actually seen that be effective in work in organizations where it gets closer and closer to being the norm, where when multiple people have regular coaching sessions, it really does help drive that coaching culture, and it does get closer to becoming the norm.
Right.
Great. So these are neat takeaways. Change is an opportunity, communication is key, and support at all levels. Excellent.
I love that, especially the support at all levels, because honestly, I think sometimes with some training initiatives and some of these development initiatives, managers and leaders get a lot of attention, which they need. They have a lot more responsibilities to manage people. But I think often individual contributors are the ones that are going to get left out first in terms of development opportunities like this. They're not going to get prioritized. But at the end of the day, giving them support as well through something like a transformation or a change is vital for the success of that transformation or any kind of cultural change that an organization is going through. So I'm really happy to see that support at all levels come up.
Definitely. And I think we have one more question. We have a couple more questions. So do you have any resources or specific case studies? Thank you, Skylar, that best illustrate business growth that was a result of a company adopting a formal coaching program?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, I'm not sure if I can name this client that we have currently. So I'm just going to say the client. I will say it's a
Client.
European client, but they are actually utilizing us as a coaching organization or as a coaching platform to help their organization go through a transformation right now. And they actually, I think, just renewed their contract for they actually expanded it a little bit. And I don't have exact numbers for you, Skylar, but I'm sure I could actually get you some of that information if you would like. Just feel free to, if I can find a way to get your, I'm sure I can find a way to get your contact information and I can send you some of these. But this company really thrived as a result of coaching to help them get through this transformation. And I can't remember, like I said, the exact growth numbers or percentages, but I do know that we were having so much success with them and they were seeing success with their transformation with coaching playing a role in it that they did renew with us and expand. So I'll see if I can get that over to you.
And we can definitely put you two in touch. And Nancy was asking a little bit more about the Kubler-Ross model.
Let's see. I was wondering why you chose. Oh, okay. I think mostly yes, because Kubler's is a little bit simpler and easier to articulate just when we're trying to talk about change management. There wasn't like a very specific reason behind it other than just like the simplicity so that a wider audience could understand it. Is that helpful, Nancy?
And I think the bridges, if you're thinking of the 4 Ps, I think it's very, the purpose and the part and the plan and the picture. I think that's very inspirational. I think that's very much reminds me of charismatic leadership. And it has its purpose and it has its value. I think the Kubler-Ross is more comprehensive. I think it's more thorough. It looks at the good, the bad, and the ugly of the change process. And I've always felt that the William Bridges model, I love it. I've taught it in several leadership development workshops. But I think that looking at it more holistically you would need a model like Kubler-Ross's. That's a little bit more comprehensive. So those are just some of my thoughts.
You articulated that way better than me. Thank you.
Very kind words. All right. Okay. So we can go ahead and finish up. Any other questions that you have? We are happy to relay them to Laurel Schuyler. It was a very thoughtful question. We will get you some more details and help get that answered. Thank you very much, Laurel, for all of your insights and your expertise and your energy and your passion for what you do. Thank you to everyone who is attending. Thank you for your time. It's a busy time of year in December. And so thank you for carving out the time to spend with us to learn more about managing change and coaching. And as you can see on the screen, you'll be receiving a PDF of the presentation. So feel free to refer to that. And on behalf of all of us here, have a wonderful rest of your day and happy holidays. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.